The air in the generator shed was thick, heavy with the smell of diesel, desperation, and the low, constant thrum that was the only reason Haven still existed. Liam wiped sweat from his brow, his knuckles white where he gripped the wrench. Beside him, Maya watched the fuel gauge, her expression grim. The needle quivered, dangerously close to empty. How much longer, Liam? Her voice was quiet, tight. Outside the reinforced shed, the world was deceptively calm. Deceptive because of the hum. The pulse, they called it, emanating from the skeletal radio tower that loomed over their small walled community. I'm tightening the bypass valve now, Liam grunted, the metal groaning under his efforts. Should give us another 12 hours maybe, if this rust bucket holds. He didn't sound confident. None of them were, not anymore. Haven. They'd found it 6 months ago. A prepper's wet dream, abandoned. Walls, watchtowers, and the radio mast, piercing the sky, and the pulse. Old Man Silas, the original owner according to the scattered journals, had figured it out somehow. A low-frequency signal, broadcast constantly, that did something strange to the dead. It didn't kill them. It didn't repel them. It calmed them. Like a shepherd's song for rotting sheep. The walkers within a 5-mile radius just wandered, aimlessly. Their moans were soft, infrequent. They rarely formed herds, rarely charged. They were still dangerous up close. A bite was still a death sentence. But the relentless pressing tide of the dead that plagued the rest of the world, here, it was just background noise. As long as the pulse kept humming. The rule, Silas had scrawled in his final entry, the handwriting shaky. Rule number 1: above all else, keep the signal alive. The pulse is peace, silence. Silence is the end. They lived by that rule. Every drop of scavenged fuel, every risky run for spare parts, every waking moment was dedicated to feeding the aging generators that powered the tower. The pulse was their shield, their fragile peace. 12 hours isn't enough, Maya stated, the obvious, her eyes scanning the tree line beyond Haven's walls. Even in their pacified state, the sight of the dead shuffling between the pines sent a shiver down her spine. Javier's team isn't back yet. They were supposed to return with the fuel tanker yesterday. Liam finally secured the valve and straightened up, wiping greasy hands on his worn jeans. He was young, barely out of his teens when the world ended, but the constant stress had etched lines around his eyes. Javier knows the schedule. He knows the risks. They'll make it. He tried to sound reassuring, but his gaze drifted to the fuel gauge too. The community was small. 27 souls huddled behind the walls, all dependent on the pulse. Javier was their leader, pragmatic and steady. His runs for fuel and supplies were Haven's lifeline. Elena, Silas's daughter, maintained the delicate broadcast equipment, interpreting her father's cryptic notes. Ben, the oldest among them, coordinated the watch shifts. And then there were the others, families, orphans of the apocalypse, all clinging to the fragile hope the pulse provided. But hope was running low, just like the diesel. Suddenly, a crackle from the radio on Maya's belt. Ben's voice strained. Maya, Liam, we've got movement. North perimeter. Not walkers. Liam grabbed his shotgun, leaning against the wall. Maya drew her pistol. Hostiles? Can't tell, Ben replied, his voice tight, with tension. One vehicle moving slow. Looks like Javier's truck, but it's beaten up bad, and only the one. They exchanged worried glances. Javier had left with 2 trucks and 5 people, including his own son, Mateo. They raced towards the north gate, the low thrum of the pulse a constant subconscious comfort beneath the sudden spike of fear. As they reached the gate, they saw it. Javier's modified pickup truck riddled with bullet holes, one side caved in, limped towards Haven. It coughed black smoke, barely moving. Ben waved them through the gate, his face pale. The truck shuddered to a halt in the compound center. The driver's side door creaked open and Javier practically fell out. He was covered in blood, not all of it his own. His face was a mask of exhaustion and grief. Javier, What happened? Maya rushed forward, her medical bag already open. Javier waved her off weakly, leaning heavily on the truck. Ambush. Raiders. About 10 miles out. He coughed, a wet, ragged sound. They hit us hard. Took the tanker. Took everything. Elena pushed through the small crowd that had gathered, her face ashen. The fuel, Javier? The tanker? Javier met her gaze, his eyes hollow. Gone, Elena. They took it. We fought. Lost 3. Sarah, David, young Thomas. His voice broke. Mateo. He's inside, hit bad. Liam helped pull Mateo from the passenger seat. The boy, barely 16, was unconscious, a bloody bandage wrapped crudely around his leg. Maya immediately went to work, barking orders for supplies. But Elena's focus was elsewhere. Her eyes were fixed on the silent, ominous space where the second truck, the fuel tanker, should have been. Gone, she whispered, the word barely audible over the ever-present hum of the pulse. Javier, how much fuel did you have left in the truck? Javier looked away, shame and pain warring on his face. Enough for the return trip. Maybe a few gallons extra. Not enough, Elena. Not nearly enough. The implication hung heavy in the air. The 12 hours Liam had bought them with the bypass valve. That was it. There was no more fuel coming. Panic began to ripple through the small crowd. Murmurs turned into fearful whispers. No fuel? What do we do? The pulse. Quiet. Ben's voice cut through the rising fear. He stood tall, his shotgun held loosely but ready. Panicking won't help. We've faced bad situations before. Not like this, Ben, someone muttered from the back. Without the pulse. We don't know it'll fail, Elena said, trying to project calm she didn't feel. Liam bought us time. We need to think, scavenge. Maybe there's a stash nearby, Silas mentioned. But her words rang hollow. Everyone knew the nearby areas had been picked clean months ago. The fuel tanker run was their only real hope. As Maya worked frantically on Mateo, trying to stabilize him, Liam checked the truck's tank. He dipped a makeshift measuring stick inside, his face falling as he pulled it out. He's right, Liam announced grimly. Maybe 5 gallons. 6, tops. That gives us 2, maybe 3 more hours beyond the bypass. 15 hours. Total. 15 hours until the pulse died. 15 hours until their fragile shield shattered. 15 hours until the silence fell. And everyone knew what Silas wrote. Silence is the end. The next few hours passed in a blur of frantic activity and simmering dread. Elena pored over Silas's journals, searching for any hint of a backup power source, a hidden fuel cache. Anything. Ben organized double watches on the walls, his eyes constantly scanning the eerily calm woods. Liam tinkered with the generator, trying to squeeze every last second of efficiency out of it. A futile effort he knew wouldn't change the outcome. Javier, patched up by Maya but broken in spirit, sat by his son's bedside, watching Mateo's shallow breathing. The weight of the lost fuel, the lost lives pressed down on him. A faction led by a pragmatic woman named Clara argued for immediate evacuation. The pulse was a crutch, she declared, her voice ringing through the tense community meeting. We got soft hiding behind it. We need to gather what we can carry and run now. Before the silence falls and those things out there wake up. Run where, Clara? Ben countered tiredly. Into the arms of the raiders who took our fuel? Into herds miles deep? Here, we have walls. We have defenses. We have a chance. A chance? Clara scoffed. You saw the gauge. We have hours. When that hum stops, the dead won't just wander anymore. Silas's notes were clear. The frequency doesn't just calm them, it confuses their senses. Without it, they'll lock onto us. Heat, sound, smell. This place will become a beacon. Staying is suicide. The argument raged, fear fueling desperate. Proposals. But there was no easy answer. Leave and face the known horrors outside, weakened and exposed. Stay and faced the unknown terror of Haven without its shield. Elena finally slammed a journal shut. "There's nothing," she said, her voice flat with defeat. "No hidden caches, no secret generator. My father put everything into maintaining the broadcast array. He believed the pulse was the only answer." Liam approached the group, wiping grease from his hands. "The bypass is holding," he reported grimly. "But the main tank is almost dry. 10 hours, maybe less now." The deadline loomed. 10 hours until silence. Javier stirred from his vigil beside Mateo. His son's breathing was shallow, his fever climbing. Maya had done all she could, but without proper antibiotics, the infection in his leg was worsening. Javier looked at the fearful faces around him, at Elena's despair, at Clara's desperate urgency. He rose slowly, his body aching, his resolve hardening. "Clara's right about one thing," Javier said, his voice raspy but clear. "Staying here when the pulse dies, it's a death trap. But running blindly isn't the answer either." He looked towards the tower, then at the generator shed. "There might be one other way. Risky, maybe stupid. But it's the only chance I see." All eyes turned to him. "The broadcast array," Javier continued, thinking aloud. "Silas designed it to send the pulse out. Broad spectrum, wide radius. What if Elena can modify it? Reverse it? Concentrate the signal?" Elena frowned. "Concentrate it for what? To boost the calming effect nearby?" "No," Javier said, shaking his head. "Not to calm them. To hurt them. Silas mentioned side effects in his notes, didn't he? Headaches, disorientation in animals, even in people if they got too close to the emitters. What if we overload the array? Push all the remaining power into one focused, high-intensity burst?" Liam's eyes widened. "You mean weaponize the pulse? A sonic blast?" "Something like that." Javier nodded. "A last resort. When the fuel finally cuts out just before the silence, we hit them with everything we've got left. Maybe it disorients them long enough for us to make a break for it. Clear a path." Elena looked horrified. "Javier, the equipment isn't designed for that. Overloading the emitters could destroy the array completely. It could cause feedback, electrical fires, it could blow the whole shed." "It's a chance, Elena," Javier insisted, his voice rising. "What other chance do we have? Wait here to be torn apart? Let Mateo die because we were too scared to try?" The community was divided again. The idea was reckless, dangerous, but the alternative, the silence, was unthinkable. I don't know if I can do it," Elena stammered, looking at her father's complex wiring diagrams. Reversing the polarity, focusing the beam, bypassing the safety limiters. It's guesswork, and we'd have seconds to activate it when the generators die. "We'll help you," Liam said, stepping forward. "Tell me what you need. We have maybe 9 hours left." The decision was made, not by consensus but by desperation. While Ben reinforced the gates and Clara reluctantly organized evacuation packs, just in case, Elena and Liam worked frantically in the generator shed. Wires were rerouted. Safety protocols bypassed. A crude focusing dish was jury-rigged using scrap metal. The air crackled with tension and ozone. Outside, the sun began to set. The shadows lengthened. The low hum of the pulse continued, a steady heartbeat counting down Haven's final hours. The walkers nearby continued their slow, aimless shuffle, oblivious to the storm gathering within the walls. Mateo's fever spiked. Maya stayed by his side, bathing his forehead, murmuring useless reassurances. Javier watched them, his face grim, clutching the detonator switch Liam had rigged. A simple button connected to the overloaded array, designed to trigger the burst. The moment the generators sputtered their last, the final hour arrived. The generator coughed, sputtered, then coughed again. The lights inside Haven flickered violently. The steady hum of the pulse wavered, dropping in pitch, becoming erratic. "It's time!" Liam yelled from the shed doorway. "Elena, now!" Elena, her hands shaking, made the final connection. Sparks flew. The lights went out completely, plunging Haven into near darkness, lit only by emergency lanterns and the dying glow of the generator's control panel. And then, silence. The sudden absence of the pulse was deafening. A physical pressure lifted. For a terrifying second, nothing happened. The only sound was the ragged breathing of 27 terrified people. Then, a low moan rose from the woods. Then, another. And another. Deeper this time. More guttural. Not the confused shuffling of before. This was different. Aware. Hungry. Now, Javier, hit it, Elena screamed, backing away from the sparking console. Javier's thumb hovered over the button. He looked at Mateo, lying pale and still. He looked at the terrified faces turned towards him in the gloom. He took a deep breath and slammed his thumb down. For a moment, nothing. Then, a high-pitched whine emanated from the radio tower, climbing rapidly beyond the range of human hearing. The tower itself seemed to vibrate. The air grew thick, heavy, making ears pop and teeth ache. No sound, but an intense, crushing pressure. Outside, the moaning stopped abruptly. It was replaced by shrieks, high-pitched, agonized sounds unlike anything they'd ever heard from the dead. They could hear shuffling turn into stumbling, crashing through underbrush. "Is it working?" Ben yelled over the oppressive pressure. Liam shielded his eyes, peering out a slit in the shed's reinforced door. They're falling? Clutching their heads? Some of them are just collapsing." A flicker of hope ignited. Maybe Javier's desperate gamble had paid off. The pressure wave lasted for perhaps 30 seconds, then faded as the last capacitor discharged. The tower fell silent again. But this silence was different. It wasn't the absence of the pulse. It was the absence of the dead. The woods were utterly quiet. Did we do it?" Maya whispered. "Bugan Xiangxin." "Grab the packs," Clara yelled, seizing the moment. "Let's move, now, while they're down." People scrambled, grabbing hastily packed bags, weapons. Javier scooped up Mateo, whose eyes fluttered open weakly at the sudden movement. They unbarred the main gate, weapons raised, peering into the unnerving stillness. The first few walkers they saw were motionless on the ground, some twitching, some completely, still skulls possibly ruptured by the intense frequency. A narrow path seemed clear. "Go, go," Ben urged, pushing people forward. They moved out, a tight knot of survivors, stepping carefully over the fallen dead. The silence was terrifying, more frightening than the constant moaning had ever been. Every snapped twig, every crunch of gravel, underfoot sounded like a gunshot. They cleared the immediate vicinity of Haven, plunging into the dark woods, heading south, away from the raiders' last known position. Hope, fragile but real, began to bloom. Javier's crazy plan had worked. They had survived the silence, but then Liam, bringing up the rear, stopped dead. He held up a hand, listening intently. "Wait," he hissed. "Do you hear that?" Everyone froze. At first there was nothing but the wind in the trees and their own ragged breathing. Then faintly they heard it, a low hum. Not the steady, calming pulse, not the high-pitched whine of the weaponized burst. This was different. A deep, resonant thrumming, like a million insects buzzing in unison. And it wasn't coming from Haven's tower. It seemed to be coming from everywhere, from the ground, from the trees. And it was getting louder. Suddenly, one of the dead walkers at Liam's feet stirred. Its head, which had seemed still, snapped up. Its eyes, milky white moments before, now seemed to glow with a faint, internal red light. It let out a low, guttural growl, deeper and more menacing than any walker cry they had ever heard. Then another, fallen walker stirred. And another. They rose slowly, stiffly, not with the jerky movements of the typical dead, but with a strange, deliberate coordination. The red glow intensified in their eyes. The low humming vibrated through the air, seeming to emanate from them. "What is this?" Elena breathed, backing away, horror dawning on her face. The burst. It didn't just hurt them. The frequency, my father's notes mentioned resonance, bioresonance. Javier stared, realization hitting him like a physical blow. "We didn't just wake them up," he whispered, his voice filled with dawning terror. "We didn't just make them mad." All around them, the fallen walkers were rising, coordinated, silent except for the deep, pervasive hum that seemed to link them together. Their heads turned in unison, the faint red glow in their eyes fixing on the fleeing survivors. They began to move, not shuffling, but walking with a steady, relentless purpose. Faster than before. Stronger. "Oh God," Maya whimpered, clutching her pistol. "What did we do?" Silas's rule wasn't just about keeping the peace. It wasn't just about confusing the dead. The pulse had been suppressing something, holding back a different stage of the infection perhaps. A latent potential triggered by the specific overload frequency. They hadn't just broken the rule. They hadn't just survived the silence. They had rung the dinner bell for something far worse, and the resonant hum grew louder as the red eyes converged in the darkness. They were awake now, truly awake. And they were coming.